Hi, I'm Marlena Gonzalez of the Middle Country Public Library, and I'd like to welcome you to another episode in our History Bites series. Today we will discuss the Freedom Riders, who were white and African American civil rights activists who participated in freedom rides, bus trips through the American South in 1961 to protest segregated bus terminals. In 1946, the U.S. Supreme Court banned segregation in interstate bus travel. A year later, the Congress of Racial Equality, CORE, and the Fellowship of Reconciliation tested the ruling by staging the Journey of Reconciliation, on which an interracial group of activists rode together on a bus through the Upper South, though fearful of journeying to the Deep South. The 1961 Freedom Rides, organized by the Congress of Racial Equality, were modeled after the organization's 1947 Journey of Reconciliation. The 1961 Freedom Rides sought to test a 1960 decision by the Supreme Court in Boynton v. Virginia that segregation of interstate transportation facilities, including bus terminals, was unconstitutional. A big difference between the 1947 Journey of Reconciliation and the 1961 Freedom Rides was the inclusion of women in the latter initiative. In both actions, black riders traveled through the Jim Crow South, where segregation continued to occur, and attempted to use whites-only restrooms, lunch counters, and waiting rooms. The original group of 13 Freedom Riders, 7 African Americans and 6 whites, left Washington, D.C. on a Greyhound bus on May 4, 1961. Their plan was to reach New Orleans, Louisiana on May 17th to commemorate the 7th anniversary of the Supreme Court's Brown v. Board of Education decision, which ruled that segregation of the nation's public schools was unconstitutional. The group traveled through Virginia and North Carolina, drawing little public notice. The first violent incident occurred on May 12th in Rock Hill, South Carolina. John Lewis, an African-American seminary student and member of the SNCC, or Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, white Freedom Rider and World War II veteran Albert Bigelow and another black rider were viciously attacked as they attempted to enter a whites-only waiting area. The next day, the group reached Atlanta, Georgia, where some of the riders split off onto a Trailways bus. On May 14th, upon stopping outside Anniston to change a slashed tire, one bus was firebombed and the Freedom Riders were beaten. Arriving in Birmingham, Alabama, the second bus was similarly attacked, and the passengers were beaten by a white mob, many of whom brandished metal pipes. In both cases, law enforcement was suspiciously late in responding, and there were suspicions of collusion in that late response. Birmingham Public Safety Commissioner Bull Connors stated that, although he knew the Freedom Riders were arriving and that violence awaited them, he posted no police protection at the station because it was Mother's Day. Although the original riders were unable to find a bus line to carry them farther, a second group of 10, originating in Nashville and partly organized by the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, renewed the effort. Undeterred by being arrested in Birmingham and transported back to Tennessee, the new Freedom Riders returned to Birmingham and, at the behest of U.S. Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy, secured a bus and protection from the State Highway Patrol as they traveled to Montgomery, Alabama. The violence toward the Freedom Riders was not quelled. Rather, the police abandoned the Greyhound bus just before it arrived at the Montgomery, Alabama terminal, where a white mob attacked the riders with baseball bats and clubs as they disembarked. Attorney General Kennedy sent 600 federal marshals to the city to stop the violence. Civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr. led a service at the First Baptist Church in Montgomery, which was attended by more than 1,000 supporters of the Freedom Riders. A riot ensued outside the church, and King called Robert Kennedy to ask for protection. Kennedy summoned the federal marshals, who used tear gas to disperse the white mob. Alabama Governor John Patterson declared martial law in the city and dispatched the National Guard to restore order. On May 24, 1961, a group of Freedom Riders departed Montgomery for Jackson, Mississippi. There, several hundred supporters greeted the riders. However, those who attempted to use the whites-only facilities were arrested for trespassing and taken to the maximum security penitentiary in Parchman, Mississippi. That same day, U.S. Attorney General Kennedy issued a statement urging a, quote, cooling-off period in the face of the growing violence. quote, "A very difficult condition exists now in the states of Mississippi and Alabama. Besides the groups of freedom riders traveling through these states, there are curiosity seekers, publicity seekers, and others who are seeking to serve their own causes, as well as many persons who are traveling because they must use the interstate carriers to reach their destination. A cooling off period is needed." End quote. During the Mississippi hearings, the judge turned and looked at the wall rather than listen to the freedom riders' defense, as had been the case when sit-in participants were arrested for protesting segregated lunch counters in Tennessee. He sentenced the riders to 30 days in jail. Attorneys from the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the NAACP, a civil rights organization, appealed the convictions all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, which reversed them. The violence and arrests continued to garner national and international attention and drew hundreds of new freedom riders to the cause. On May 29, 1961, Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy petitioned the Interstate Commerce Commission to ban segregation in interstate bus travel. The order, which was issued on September 22nd and went into effect on November 1st, led to the removal of Jim Crow signs from stations, waiting rooms, water fountains, and restrooms in bus terminals. Thank you for joining us for today's episode. If you enjoyed it, click like, and if you watched it on YouTube, hit subscribe. Thanks so much, and we'll see you all next time.